Joyce Beatty, whose district includes most of Columbus, and where there have been protests that took place there. In fact, Congresswoman Beatty was involved in those protests, peaceful protests, that unfortunately escalated very quickly. She was also, as a result of that escalation, pepper sprayed. Let's watch this incident happen. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us this hour. First of all, walk us through, if you can, from what happened from your perspective, because a lot of people would be watching that at home thinking this was a peaceful protest, but even in the most peaceful of protests, you see a situation escalate and turn violent very quickly.
Yes, absolutely. It was a very planned, organized, peaceful protest. And I wanted to join those protesters, many from my district, many activists, all organized, working together, being very intentional in getting their message out, exercising their freedom of speech. And so I wanted to be there to stand in solidarity with them, standing there also as someone who is a Black woman, a grandmother, wanting to make sure that we were out there because people are hurting. There's pain. When you look at what just recently happened with George Floyd, when you look at Ahmaud Arbery, when you look at Breonna Taylor, and we can go back to all of those that preceded them, all the way back during my lifetime to Emmett Till. And so there was a lot of pent-up frustration. From my side, no tolerance for those who are tearing up our city, those who are not members or citizens of our community, coming in, attacking businesses and destroying them. That's destructive and distracting. This was not that. So in just a few seconds, it seems like something went wrong. One young man had a confrontation. I'm not sure what was said. And once he was thrown to the ground, you can imagine what happened. A young African-American female was expressing herself very clearly, all within her rights. But once she was pushed and shoved, the crowd came forward. I went forward, hands up in the air, saying, let's not excite them. This is wrong. And then the pepper spray came. I think it was an act of emotion. I think it was an act that was unnecessary.
Yeah, Congresswoman, I want to contrast for you President Trump and President Obama, because we've just heard from President Obama for the first time about this and how to really translate this moment that we are witnessing in this country into a moment of change. In his post that he just put online, he writes, I've heard some suggest that the recurrent problem of racial bias in our criminal justice system proves that only protests and direct action can bring about change, and that voting and participation in electoral politics is a waste of time. I couldn't disagree more. I wanted to get your thoughts about that for this moment, because as somebody who was out there on the streets protesting, can we have meaningful change just by virtue of protests, or does this need to be translated, as President Obama suggests, into political action and changing of laws?
Oh, I think it's all of that. Certainly, I think we have to have different protocols. This is systemic racism. It can't necessarily be legislated away, but I do think that there are things that we can do, that we need to establish protocols. We need to look at community and citizens reviews. We need to come together as a group, but we also need to make sure that people get registered to vote and that people vote and that there's more engagement. It is far more than peaceful protesting at this point. But I think that's a good way for people's voices to be heard, and people want us to hear them. Now, what we do with that is what is so important. How do we then affect those things? This is not the first time that protesters have been out there saying, fight for justice, fight against the injustices. This is not the first time we have had a George Floyd. There are many African-American young men and women and other people who have been lynched and murdered in senseless deaths. laughs. So we have to get our voices out. We have to let the younger protesters, they want to be heard. I am fine with that, but it does not end here. We must come together. We must enact laws. We must be forceful, and we must do that if we are going to truly be invested in making a difference and saving lives.
Right. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, thank you so much. Stay safe out there if you do go back out to any of those protests. We certainly appreciate your